What is going on, Jet fans? Thank you for stopping in. Dalvin Cook is a New York Jet. Did a whole live stream about it last night, but I wanted to put out something bite-sized, less than an hour long here on the move. Where are you guys at? How do you feel about the Dalvin Cook signing? And of course, maybe even more importantly, who do you think is the odd man out? Unfortunately, as we celebrate somebody else coming to the team, another running back on this roster is Jet's tenure is most likely coming to an end this month. Who do you think that will be? So I'll read you a quote from one of the last videos that Dalvin Cook came up in from yours truly. Here's what I said. Quote, I'm a little over it, to be honest. If they want to give him $4 million in base plus incentives, fine. He makes you better. He's better than Bam Knight. And if we're not going to spend that money anywhere else, then fine. Unquote. And that's where I'm at. And I don't want I don't want it to be like negative or I'm a party pooper. I hope it's not coming across that way. I do think he makes you better. I just don't want to flip flop and do cartwheels for a guy that I was kind of on the fence with, if that makes sense. So I'm not trying to be negative here. But I do want to talk about what he brings to the team, the positives, some of the weaknesses, and then who might be that odd man out. Now, number one, yes, he makes the team better. Does he improve us as much as an offensive lineman would? No. Is there an offensive lineman that we could get for that money that would probably start on this team? Probably not. I'd still throw a contract to Dalton Reisner and kick ABT to tackle. That's still something I'm interested in. So we'll see how the offensive line shakes out. But like I said, if we're not going to spend that money anywhere else, then fine, let's do it. There's no such thing as a terrible 1-year deal. No money into 2024. That's the part of the contract I like the most, although I was way off on the valuation of the player. In fact, I said in another video, if he got 8 or 9 million in base, I would eat a shoe live on the air. So thank goodness JD saved me by 1 million. But Dalvin Cook, I watched a pretty good sample of his film in 2022, and he still has some twitched up juice in his legs and is a better athlete than all the running backs on this team, not named Brees Hall. When there's a big hole there, he can still hit the nitrous in a way that, only Brees and Izzy, but Izzy doesn't quite have the vision there yet. And you watch him on film and he's like boom, 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 just everywhere. You press play, pause, play, and he's just the lateral agility is elite. He's a dynamic athlete. And I think that's the word the Jets were looking to add to this offense. Okay. With the Odell Beckham Jr. interest. Again, I'll admit, I wasn't a huge fan of bringing in Odell Beckham Jr. either for the contract that he got. But they were clearly looking to add some explosiveness, some yak, guys like signing of Miko Hardman, like the drafting of Izzy Abanikanda, guys who can give you a touchdown without having to go 8, 10, 12 plays, just make house calls. And he still did that at a high clip last year. He did. All right. Now, Dalvin Cook, some of the weaknesses. The drops, fumbles, and pass protection are some of the worst of any running back in the NFL. Now, throughout his whole career, that's pretty much been consistent, but he's been so good with the ball in his hands that is overweighed that by a significant margin. In 2022, not so much. Here's my big question. Again, I don't want to be negative. It's just my opinion of the player I watched. So I'm not saying I know better than Joe Douglas or any of that. This is just my 2 cents of the player I watched. The inability to create his own yards and really be elusive and break tackles, that was the biggest concern to me, because if he can't do that and he has all those other things that are negative, I'm not saying any bum off the street could go get 1,000 yards and all the touchdowns that he got. I understand that. But I do think maybe if he can't do that, we're not quite getting the player that we think. However, I will say he did have shoulder surgery. And if the shoulder being patched up allows him to run more violently, more aggressive, and run through contact and be, 2020, 2021 Dalvin Cook, then we're cooking with gas. And we got one of the best running back tandems in the NFL once Brees Hall is back. So that's kind of my opinion of the signing. Kind of depends on to what extent the patched up shoulder improves his ability to create his own yards. But there's no such thing as a horrible 1-year deal, right? He makes the team better. And I think that it's going to allow them to bring Brees Hall back slowly for a guy who's proven, who we know can handle the volume. And maybe he'll also be more efficient if his workload is reduced, right? That's valid. Now, who's the odd man out? I think it's Bam, and I know it feels like we're all just crapping on Bam Knight because that's what everybody's saying, and I don't want it to be that. I adore Zonovan Knight. I truly do. I loved the UDFA pickup. He was right in there with Tony Adams, and and Bryce Huff and Calvin Jackson Jr., admittedly, of some of my favorite UDFA moves. A couple have worked out better than others, but he's proven he belongs in the league. Bam Knight is not some scrub. Bam Knight will catch on somewhere else. Someone else will give him a chance. I think it's Izzy's a lock, Brees is a lock, Dalvin's a lock. So it's between Izzy and Michael Carter. And I think we've kind of sold our Michael Carter stock when it's at an all-time low, and I'm not so sure about that. Michael Carter had an awesome rookie year. Awesome. He was our best offensive weapon on not a very good offense given, but still top 5 in the league in broken tackle rate, great contact balance. He chipped in the passing game well over 4 yards per carry behind not a good offensive line. Michael Carter dominated entire games. The Mike White game against the Bengals. Yeah, when Michael Carter had 180 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns, that's the Michael Carter game. And then he starts the season against the Ravens. Looks like our best player too. Go look and who led the Jets in rushing and catches week 1. Then at the end, he ends the year with an injured ankle and playing terrible behind a bad offensive line. Now, I'm not going to pretend there wasn't a stretch in the middle when he was healthy and didn't look like himself. Was not good. But Bam Knight and Michael Carter were pretty identical last year in terms of yards per carry and broken tackle percentage and yards after contact and DVOA and drops fumbles. Pretty much the same player, but Michael Carter has one awesome year. And Bam Knight really, if we're being honest, had 6 good quarters against Minnesota and Chicago, the 2 worst defenses in the NFL. And if I'm looking at how Joe Douglas treats his draft picks, Ashton Davis is still here. They kept Ashton Davis over Jason Pinnock because he was better? No, because he was a 3rd round pick and Pinnock was a 6th or whatever round pick. Draft pedigree keeps guys around, whether we want to admit it or not. Denzel Mims would have been gone a lot sooner if he wasn't a 2nd round pick. He asked to be traded. They weren't even playing him, and they kept him around, held him prisoner for like another year. Joe Douglas has said that they got trade offers for more during the season, but they waited. For Becton, but they waited. So if I'm just reading the tea leaves on how JD treats his running backs or draft picks, rather, I think Michael Carter says, ideally we get Bam on the practice squad. I think it's a 50-50 shot, Now, again, some of Cook's weaknesses are Michael Carter's weaknesses too, particularly in pass pro. Michael Carter and Dalvin Cook are 2 of the worst pass protecting backs in the NFL. So Bam's okay at that. So does that factor in? It could. I think the players are, they're pretty close, but I just think Michael Carter being a draft pick is going to save him unless he demands out, like Elijah Moore. So that's where I'm at. I think the Jets got better by bringing in Dalvin Cook, even though if it's a little bit richer than I thought. I think if his shoulder being patched up makes him break tackles, it'll be well worth it. I think if it doesn't, we're maybe not getting as better as we thought. And Bam Knight maybe playing for another team if we can't get him back on the practice squad. Again, I want to come on here just all fired up. I like the aggression. He makes us better. I just don't want to go from I want to stay consistent with what I've said. So I hope it wasn't too negative of a video, but I appreciate you guys hanging out so much, and we'll talk ball soon.